Hello, and welcome to the Offsite Data Sync video series. In this video, we will be discussing how to create a backup job for your veeam 9 infrastructure. To complete this tutorial, you will need a VM or server running veeam 9, some VMs to back up, and a location to store the data. Now, in order to begin, we do need to be in our veeam console, so you can either double-click the console icon on your desktop, or if it's already running and minimized, simply go down to the taskbar and bring it back to the forefront. We will need to be in the backup and replication section, looking at our jobs listing. A backup job does exactly what its name implies. It will back up the current state of a VM of your choosing in a compressed form. To do this, under Primary Jobs in the toolbar, we're going to click Backup Job, and this will open our job wizard. Now the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to give the job a meaningful name, because that makes it easier for us to locate it. And we'll call this one Local Server Backup. Then we can go ahead and we can give it a better description if we need to. In this case, I'm going to just put a simple description in here. And we're going to go ahead when we're satisfied, and we're going to click Next to add the VMs. On this screen, we're going to go ahead and we're going to click the Add button. This will bring up a selector box that will display any VMware vCenter servers or hosts that we have entered into the system, and we can just navigate through them like we would a file explorer. The first time you click on it, it will take some time to populate. That's normal. But once it does, we can go ahead and we can drill down to exactly where we want. And as you'll be able to see here, this will list every single vCenter, host, and vApp attached to that vCenter server. Now you can select either an entire vApp or individual VMs. As you can see here, I'm going to open up this vApp. This is where the individual VM is. Now if you do an entire vApp, that has an advantage. You can add or remove VMs from the vApp and not have to change your veeam job. They'll automatically be included. Now we just want to do a single VM within this vApp, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select it. I'm going to select my PRTG test unit and hit Add, and you'll see it'll be added to the grid, and it'll have an estimated size for it, which is also shown down here. Also from this screen, we can remove VMs. We can exclude VMs from a vApp if we choose a vApp. If we have multiple VMs or multiple items, we can also use up-down to change the order in which they're processed. When we're all set, we'll hit Next. On this screen, we're going to set up where the job's going to go. So we're going to use the drop-down box under Backup Repository, and we're going to make sure that this is pointing at the location we want to store the data, which it will come up and show us how much data space is free. We're going to check our proxy setting. In this case, automatic is good enough. We're going to check our retention policy. This is the number of restore points we want to keep. It usually defaults to 14. That's too many for me. I'm going to run it down to 7. There's also an option to configure secondary destinations, which we don't need, and then there's the Advanced tab. This first screen is where we can set up what type of backup it is. If you want more information, please see our video on backup types and their explanations for more information on this, as it does get a little technical. There's also an option at the bottom to periodically force it to do active fulls. By checking the box, you can then set a schedule on which it will perform full backups. Under Maintenance, we have a couple of options. Primarily, this is where we can turn on our corruption guard, which will force the system to periodically scan the backup files and attempt to auto-heal any correction. We can also set it to try and remove old VM data after X number of days in the system. Storage allows us to set storage options, whether we want inline data deduplication, exclusion of file blocks, our compression level, and the storage optimization. Most of these you'll want to leave at the defaults that Veeam leaves them at. This is also where we would enable encryption. Now, if you do choose to enable encryption, you would simply check the box down at the bottom, and then you would have to provide it with a password. That password, although it is stored in the credentials, does not get stored in the configuration backup that the machine will periodically do. But we don't need compression or encryption for this. Notification allows us to set up who will get notified on the job status when it runs, and whether or not it's going to use the global notification settings, or whether or not we can want to specify custom settings for the job. We also have a tab for vSphere where we can enable some vSphere specific options, whether we want it to actively integrate with the VMware tools, and whether or not we want it to use change block tracking. Integration is some things that deals with the storage systems, and scripts allows us to specify scripts to run either before or after the job. We don't need to change any of these, so we'll just cancel out of that, and then we'll hit next. Guest processing is where we would set up if we were backing up multiple Windows boxes that had, say, SQL databases or Exchange servers or those types of things. We can actually allow Veeam to interact with those and properly truncate their logs correctly. When you do have to provide credentials to log into the OS, which can be done like other credentials on the system. You can then also sit there and specify which applications on which server are going to be affected and what the result must be from them. Also allows you to turn it off on individual machines within the job. You can also test the credentials to make sure they work. We don't need that enabled, so we're just going to disable it and go ahead and click Next. Scheduling is where things get a little more interesting. This allows you to specify when the job is going to run and how it's going to run. In order to enable the scheduling, you would click the job at the top here that says Run the job automatically. And you have a couple of options. You can set the job to run daily, in which case you can set the time and the day it's going to run, either every day, weekdays, or days of your choosing. You can also set the job to run monthly, in which you can set it to run at a certain time on a certain increment of a certain day on certain months. You can also set a job to run periodically. You can set the duration, then you can set the units, and then how often. Be very careful when setting it for minutes or continuously, as you need to make sure that the Veeam machine has enough resources and enough power to be able to handle that for whatever duration you pick. The last option is really neat. It's called After This Job. This enables you, in a system that has multiple jobs, this enables you to chain the jobs together. So when one job finishes, the other job will automatically start up. Saves a lot of scheduling time when you have a lot of jobs, and it basically, if it's enabled and you have multiple jobs, this drop down box would have a list of all the jobs, and you can then set it which job you want this to come after. It's a very useful tool and can make scheduling a lot easier, and it's specific to backup jobs. You also, when you schedule a job, you can set the automatic retry. This will say if for any reason a specific VM in the job fails, this will let you set whether or not you want it to retry or not, how many times you want it to retry, and how long you want it to wait in between each attempt. You can also set a backup window, and you can set it so that if the job exceeds that allowed backup window, the job will terminate and end, rather than go into a wait cycle for retry. But we don't need a schedule set, so I'm going to uncheck the box, and we're going to click Next to move on to our summary screen. And there we go. And as you can see here, we now have a summary of the job that we're going to create. There is a checkbox that says Run this job when I clicked Finish. It's usually a good idea to leave that unchecked in case you have to create multiple jobs. When you're all set, you click Finish, and you'll see now that we have a job created. Now in order to start a job, because as we set it up, it's not scheduled and it has a status of stopped, so we have to manually tell this job to start and when to run. So we would select the job, and up here on the top you can see we have buttons for Start and Active Full. And what we're going to do is, in order to start it, we're just going to click the Start button. Now when the job starts, it'll take a moment, and you'll get this large area down on the bottom for any job that is running. We do have a video that teaches you how to actually interpret the data that's stored down there. But the job will take a moment, and it'll start up, and away it goes. And that's all there is to adding a backup job. We hope you found it useful. Feel free to stop over and check out the other videos from Offsite DataSync.